Well, continuing our talk here with Paul Crane about the population trends and what's been shown up here is very interesting. I mean, we're on what we said last time, though. Nothing particularly new. It's just carrying on, isn't it? I mean,
it is, yes. Well, there's been some slight increase, perhaps, in the overall population, but this is based on the government estimates, which are not perfect, as it were.
And Tim was discussing this month, so this is why you've come back with the thing. Okay, we've got two more graphs to show you, and well, over to you then. The births and deaths on the Isle of Man.
Yes, the red line, I haven't marked it on here, the red line is the births and the green line is the number of deaths. You can see the number of deaths has generally been fairly level, although it's risen just inside this last year. The births and deaths are recorded, so these are not estimates, these are actual figures. So
what has happened then since 2010? I mean, it's just dropped off the...
2009 and 2010, we had more than 1,000 births in each of those years. And then it started to fall, and the fall has continued and continued. It looked as if it might be levelling out, but it's dropped again. So we've gone from 1,020 births here to 717 births here. That's a drop of 29.7%, 30% drop in those 8 years.
So the Manxies are not having us babies. I mean, people actually living here, whatever, going to know. This is all nobles and whatever. This is numbers. This is definite numbers of births.
Yeah,
right?
That's right. These are definite numbers. A number of things going on behind that. One is to do with, and we know that the 2016 census showed us that there'd been net outward migration of people in their 20s and through to early 30s. So an outward movement of those age groups. A decline, very substantial decline in the number of women of childbearing age, so that's part of the movements going on. But then the government's own analysis in the Managing Population Challenges document that they produced showed evidence of later births and increased gaps between births. And they're not unique to the Isle of Man by any means. They're happening in the UK and happening in other areas too. Declining number of births is a feature of a number of countries, and a number of countries have got strategies to deal with that. France at the moment is offering, when you have a third child, you get a grant of something like £700 a month, you get cuts in your income tax and things like that to encourage people to have families, so it's pro-natalist policies. So we've got the reduced people of childbearing age in numbers, and we've got these bigger gaps between children, which is often seen as a response to, in the wider world, it would call austerities. The people are finding it tight, so they delay first child, bigger gaps, have fewer children. And so all of those may be going on.
Death rate going up a bit, is that helpful?
Death rate isn't. I think that just reflects the growing older population that we've got. But the death rate, it's not the death rate, it's the number of deaths does appear higher. But we have been, indeed, for most of the second half of the 20th century, deaths exceeded births here. In some texts, it almost describes it as that's the way the Isle of Man is. But that was really a function of the young people we'd lost in the 50s and the older population that came in the 60s and 70s. So we had an elderly population then. And we had such economic growth in the 90s that this levelled out, and we entered the 21st century with more births and deaths, and that widened, and things look very strong here. But back in 2014 thereabouts, we crossed this picture again where there are more deaths than births. So now when we start projecting our population into the future, we have to allow for the fact that there may be losses of 200 due to the gap between deaths and births. You've got to have 200 people moving in every year to make up that gap. And that's new territory for the Isle of Man, really.
Okay, well, let's go to your final slide and the changing size of schools. I mean, the cohorts and the schools. I mean, this is one of your favourite things you bring up, isn't it?
Well, I think the significance of doing this is if your sole source of information is the number of patients for each GP, the GP register. If that's your sole source of information, you've got this problem with it's an overcount and you're trying to calculate the differences and so on. So that's one source. It's hugely useful, but it's one source. I'm setting alongside that the birth and death data that we've just seen, which adds something else to this picture of what's going on. And then I'm adding this in, which is what's available from the school's Department of Education, Sport and Culture gathers data at the start of every term, but especially at the start of the autumn term, the start of the new school year. So I'm using data here from the start of the new school years. I've gone back to 2015. That's the start of the 2015 school year. That's the school year that was in place when the census happened, okay? Excuse me. I think I've then run it over the 3 years. I've taken the school year groups 1 to 8. I stopped at 8 because if I'd taken year 11, they wouldn't have been there in 2016, you know. So
sure.
Year 8, by the time we reached 2018, they were year 9, year 10, they were year 11 when 2018 school year started. So here we can see what has happened to those groups. So this is not looking at how school numbers change as one year comes in and it's a bigger year than last year or not. This is looking at how specific years have changed. So if we take year 1, there were just over 950 of them in 2015. The numbers have dropped and risen and dropped a bit again. At the end of the 3-year period, there were 9 fewer in that group, the year 1 group. There may have been some entered and some gone, but the balance is down 9. Year 2, we're up 3. Year 3 down here rose by 13. Year 4 dropped by 2. Year 5 down here dropped by 15. Year 6, the darker blue one, dropped by 27. Year 7 went up 6. Year 8.
So, okay,
and
what can this tell you now then?
It's telling us that as the years go by and people with children move into the Isle of Man and out of the Isle of Man, there's no growth going on. You know, there is no influx of families creating growth. Indeed, the balance overall, I think, was down 40 odd on all the year groups together. And that is an indication. I think that the 40, there's 7,000 students across these groups, so a difference of 40 is neither here nor there. So I think all we can really take from it is we haven't got a removal of young adults and young families moving into the Isle of Man. We haven't got a change in that position. Not movement out, perhaps, but certainly not movement in. There's no growth in the families in the Isle of Man due to movement. This would only show movement, you know, but it's not affected by births and so on. This would only show movement.
It's fascinating, and there's so much more we could talk about. Should people be worried? I mean, you know, the government, should they be worried about the tax take and all that, and the way the population, you know, the too many old people, too many young, not enough younger people, and that sort of thing?
Worried is not the word that I would use, but we have got a number of population vulnerabilities, is the term that I use in the population atlas, and I still see those absolutely here. We have got a population age structure with a lot of people in the 50s and 60s who will turn 65 as the years pass by. So we've got, you know, large numbers to move into that older category. We have got migration that's reduced to a low level, and it's not altering the number of children in these groups. It is not changing the number of births. The births dropped again last year. That is giving us a greater imbalance in the population is part of that picture. The drop in those births from over 1,000 to 700, that will be visible on the population structure of the Isle of Man in 60, 70 years' time. You know, it's a significant difference that's there, that group passing up with fewer people in it. It'll never be filled in by the movement in, because that's never so age selective that it would fill in the years. You know, it would be good to see those birth figures rising again. It would be good to see some growth in the middle years, because the more we have a population that's aged over 65, the more mobility problems that we will have, the greater healthcare requirements we will inevitably have. That's not saying that people over 65 are not valuable to us. They still are. They're often the wealthiest people in society and have a good spending power and so on.
Matching this up to the UK, I mean, is it quite a different look?
Well, the UK is very, very different because it's been going through population growth that's been very substantial over these years. I think they've been, in some years, hitting something like 500,000 growth in the year. And that's one of the surprising things too about the Isle of Man's population, that the UK population's growing, but none of that is spilling over to here. And for me that raises huge questions about why is this happening? Yeah. Why are young adults choosing to leave? Okay. Why are few coming in? We've got in excess of 2,000 full and part-time vacancies and only 400 unemployed. So the job opportunities are here. We've modified the work permit system to encourage movement in.
Have you passed all this on to Tynwald members, by the way?
I haven't yet.
I think you really should.
At this stage, I'm just,
no, it's fascinating.
Yeah, but
thank you so much for joining us. Okay. And this is probably raising a lot of, questions here. Yeah. And Tynwald are meant to be debating the whole thing, so we'll see.
Well, I think Tynwald are looking at the programme for government is what they're looking at, and they've got some amendments to that. But of course, part of the programme to government is this growing the economically active population, and that, I'm not saying that that's easy to do. I haven't got all the answers by any means. I've got as many questions as anything. I'd love to see some really good research going on into this to find out why people are leaving, and the business of migrations, they're complex because they're not always based on factual reality. I heard of somebody who was leaving the Isle of Man to go to the UK because of the debts that our government had. Now, in actual fact, we technically haven't got any debts.
Yeah.
The UK is running at £1.7 billion debts.
Okay.
So that. But if that's what the guy thinks,
it's perception.
That's what he moves. It's
Paul,
perception. Yeah.
Thank you so much for joining us,
Okay.
and
my pleasure.
Food for thought as always.
Okay.
Thank you.
Right. Thank you.